The muted roar of the engines shifted, a subtle change in pitch signaling their descent. Beijing shimmered below, a sprawling tapestry of light woven into the encroaching dusk. Gavin Langston, CEO of Hypernova Systems, barely registered the view. His mind, a tightly wound spring of calculations and contingencies, was already on the ground, in the opulent conference room of Jinhua Technologies. This deal, this monumental billion-dollar partnership, was the culmination of months of relentless work. It was the validation he craved, the silencing blow to the whispers questioning his leadership. He absently waved away the flight attendant offering a pre-landing beverage. Success tasted sweeter than champagne. "Everything lined up for tomorrow?" he asked, his voice clipped, each word a precisely placed domino in the chain reaction he envisioned. Leah Dorsey, his chief strategy officer, didn't flinch at his brusqueness. She'd weathered his intensity for years, her pragmatic nature a perfect foil to his volatile ambition. Contracts reviewed, slides updated, the numbers are rock solid. She paused, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. That flicker, minuscule as it was enough to prick Gavin's heightened senses. A cold dread, swift and sharp, began to seep into the crevices of his confidence. "Only thing left is the interpreter," Leah continued, her voice carefully neutral. "He'll meet us at the hotel tonight." Relief washed over Gavin, so potent it left him slightly breathless. He'd almost let himself succumb to the phantom anxieties that plagued him in these high-stakes moments. Then were golden. He allowed himself a small, tight smile. Golden. The word resonated, echoing the potential windfall this deal represented. He could almost feel the weight of it, the tangible manifestation of his vision. The plane touched down, a gentle jolt that nevertheless sent a tremor through Gavin's carefully constructed composure. He chided himself internally. He needed to remain steady, the unshakable bedrock of his company. As they taxied towards the terminal, Leah's phone buzzed. He watched her face, searching for any sign of disruption. Her expression, however, shifted from composed professionalism to something akin to disbelief. "Gavin," she began, her voice tight with a tension he hadn't heard before, "we have a problem. Mr. Wren, our interpreter, has had a family emergency. He won't be able to make it." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Gavin felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't a minor setback. It was a catastrophic derailment. Mr. Wren wasn't just any interpreter. He was a linguistic bridge, fluent not just in Mandarin and English, but in the intricate nuances of business negotiation, the unspoken cultural cues that could make or break a deal of this magnitude. Without him, they were adrift, their meticulously crafted presentation rendered useless. Panic, raw and visceral, clawed at the edges of his control. Years of cultivated composure threatened to shatter under the weight of this unforeseen disaster. Victor Crane, their head of finance, let out a low groan. Gavin could feel the weight of his gaze, heavy with accusation. This deal was their lifeline, their chance to silence the naysayers who doubted Hypernova's ability to compete on the global stage. Failure wasn't an option. His mind raced, frantically searching for alternatives. Could they find another interpreter in time? The chances were slim, almost non-existent. Qualified interpreters, especially those versed in the intricacies of high-level business negotiations, were rare commodities. And even if they found someone, the lack of preparation, the absence of that crucial pre-meeting synergy would be a crippling disadvantage. They disembarked the plane, the vibrant energy of the Beijing airport swirling around them like a mocking current. Gavin felt a profound disconnect, his internal turmoil a stark contrast to the bustling normalcy of the terminal. He could barely process the customs formalities, his mind a whirlwind of frantic calculations. As they stepped into the humid night air, the city lights blurred into an indistinguishable haze. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, suffocating him. He had led his team to the precipice of triumph, only to be thwarted by a single, unforeseen event. The car ride to the hotel was a blur of tense silence, punctuated by Leah's clipped phone calls, each one ending in frustrated sighs. Gavin stared out the window, the city lights morphing into menacing, flickering eyes. He could almost hear the whispers of his critics, their voices amplified by the gnawing fear in his gut. Reaching the hotel, they moved through the opulent lobby, the polished marble and gleaming chandeliers a stark reminder of the high stakes they were playing for. As they waited for the elevator, Gavin's gaze drifted across the lobby, landing on a figure he'd initially dismissed as part of the background janitor, meticulously cleaning a spill. The man, dressed in a simple uniform, moved with a quiet grace, his focus absolute. Something about his posture, the subtle tilt of his head as he listened to the distraught guest explaining the spill, caught Gavin's attention. It was a strange, incongruous observation amidst the swirling chaos of his own thoughts, but it lodged itself in his mind. The elevator arrived, its doors sliding open with a soft hiss. As they stepped inside, Gavin's phone rang. It was Mr. Chungi, CEO of Jinhua Technologies. His voice, usually cordial, held a note of polite inquiry. "Mr. Langston, I understand there might have been a slight complication with your interpreter." The blood ran cold in Gavin's veins. The news had traveled fast. He felt a wave of shame, a burning humiliation that intensified the already crushing pressure. He opened his mouth to speak, to offer some semblance of an explanation, but the words caught in his throat. He was adrift, lost in a sea of uncertainty. The muted hum of the Beijing skyline, a symphony of distant traffic and flickering neon signs, seeped through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Gavin's suite. He stood, a silhouette against the cityscape, the weight of the impending deal pressing down on him like the starless sky. Tomorrow, Hypernova Systems, his life's work, would either ascend to unprecedented heights or plummet into the abyss of missed opportunity. He rotated the heavy crystal tumbler in his hand, the amber liquid within swirling like his own turbulent thoughts. He'd envisioned this moment countless times, the culmination of years of relentless work, of strategic maneuvering, of sheer, unwavering will. But now, a prickle of unease crawled beneath his skin, a dissonant note in the otherwise triumphant melody playing in his head. He'd learned to trust his instincts, the subtle whispers of his subconscious that often foretold both triumph and disaster. Tonight, the whispers were unsettling. The sharp ring of his phone sliced through the quiet tension. Leah, he'd known she was still working, tirelessly coordinating the final details, a testament to her unwavering dedication. He answered, expecting a routine update, another piece falling into place. Instead, her voice, clipped and urgent, shattered the fragile calm. "Emergency. Call me now. Rim backed out. Family emergency. Left the country tonight." The words hung in the air, suspended like a guillotine blade above his carefully constructed plans. He felt a cold dread seep into his bones, the crystal tumbler suddenly heavy, threatening to slip from his numb fingers. "What?" His voice, usually a weapon of confident authority, was thin, brittle. He could hear the frantic tapping of keys on the other end of the line, the desperate scramble to salvage the situation. He could almost see Leah, her brow furrowed in concentration, her fingers flying across her laptop, a whirlwind of controlled panic. "We're trying to find someone else," she continued, her voice strained, "but no one we trust is available on this short notice." The room seemed to shrink around him, the panoramic view of the glittering city now a mocking reminder of the vastness of the problem they faced. Mr. Chungi, the CEO of Jinhua Technologies, was a stickler for protocol, a last-minute interpreter, especially one who couldn't guarantee absolute discretion and cultural sensitivity, could derail everything. Billions of dollars, years of negotiation, the future of Hypernova all hanging in the balance. He closed his eyes, fighting the wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm him. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not after everything they'd invested. He paced the length of the suite, the plush carpet muffling his agitated steps. Victor, his head of finance, sat on the edge of the sofa, his face ashen, mirroring Gavin's own growing despair. He could see the calculations churning behind Victor's eyes, the grim arithmetic of lost opportunity. The silence in the room was thick with unspoken anxieties, punctuated only by the rhythmic tap of Victor's foot against the polished floor. The air crackled with a static tension, the unspoken fear hanging heavy in the opulent suite. "What about Linguitech?" Victor finally spoke, his voice tight with apprehension. "They've worked with us before." Gavin shook his head, already anticipating the answer. "They're booked solid. Conference in Shanghai." Leah already checked. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the prickle of sweat on his scalp. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, each second chipping away at their dwindling hope. The weight of the situation pressed upon him, a physical manifestation of the immense pressure he was under. He could feel the eyes of his board, his investors, his competitors, all watching, waiting for him to stumble. Failure was not an option. He thought of his father, his legacy, the unwavering belief in his son's ability to achieve the impossible. He thought of the countless sleepless nights, the sacrifices he'd made, the relentless drive that had propelled him to this point. He wouldn't let it all crumble now. Not like this. He could practically taste the bitter tang of defeat, a flavor he'd sworn he would never allow himself to experience. He had to find a solution. He had to. Suddenly, Leah's voice, sharp and decisive, cut through the oppressive silence. There might be one more possibility. Long shot, but he held his breath, a flicker of hope igniting in the pit of his stomach. A recommendation from the hotel manager. Apparently, one of their staff, a janitor, speaks fluent Mandarin. Impeccable credentials, apparently. Background in linguistics and conflict resolution. Gavin stared at the phone, a wave of disbelief washing over him. A janitor? Conflict resolution? What kind of twisted joke was this? His initial reaction was a surge of indignant skepticism. This was a multi-billion-dollar deal, not a neighborhood dispute. But desperation gnawed at the edges of his doubt. He glanced at Victor, who looked equally stunned. A janitor? Victor echoed his thoughts, his voice laced with incredulity. Gavin could feel the skepticism radiating from him, a palpable wave of disbelief. He understood. This was absurd, preposterous. But what choice did they have? The clock was ticking, and every passing second brought them closer to the precipice of failure. He closed his eyes, weighing the improbable against the inevitable. The whispers in his subconscious, the ones that had warned him of the impending crisis, now seemed to murmur a different message. Consider the unexpected. He took a deep breath, the crisp night air a momentary reprieve from the stifling tension in the room. He looked out at the city lights, the vast expanse of Beijing spread out before him, a testament to the unpredictable nature of life, of business, of everything. He could feel the weight of his own biases, the ingrained prejudices that had shaped his perception of the world, of success, of worth. A janitor. The very idea was jarring, a stark contrast to the polished, impeccably dressed professionals he was accustomed to dealing with. But beneath the surface of his skepticism, a sliver of curiosity began to emerge. What if? The question hung in the air, a fragile tendril of possibility in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. He looked at Victor, his own uncertainty mirrored in his colleague's eyes. "Tell her to bring him up," he said, his voice barely a whisper, the words heavy with the weight of his decision. He knew, in that moment, that he was taking a leap of faith, a gamble on the most improbable of saviors. A janitor. The thought still felt surreal, a bizarre twist in the narrative he had so meticulously crafted. But as he stood there, the city lights shimmering below, he realized that sometimes the most extraordinary solutions come from the most unexpected places. The opulent hallway of the peninsula Beijing shimmered, a polished expanse of jade and gold reflecting the nervous energy radiating from Gavin. The ornate clock ticked with an almost malicious precision, each second chipping away at his composure. He could feel the weight of the Hypernova board's expectations pressing down on him, a tangible force that made his shoulders ache. This deal with Jinhua Technologies was everything. His reputation, the company's future all hinged on the next hour. He adjusted his tie for the 10th time, the silk feeling like a noose. He glanced at Leah, his chief strategy officer, her usual unflappable demeanor showing the slightest crack. He knew she was desperately trying to contact a replacement interpreter. But Beijing at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday wasn't exactly teeming with fluent Mandarin speakers versed in multi-billion-dollar tech acquisitions. The sudden cancellation of their interpreter felt like sabotage, though he knew logically it was probably just a nasty twist of fate. Anything, he asked, the question hanging heavy in the air, already knowing the answer. Leah shook her head, the elegant twist of her dark hair a stark contrast to the pale tension in her face. Nothing concrete. A few leads, but nothing reliable enough for a meeting of this magnitude. Her internal monologue was a whirlwind of contingency plans, each more desperate than the last. She cursed internally, the polished professional facade barely concealing a simmering panic. She could feel Victor Crane, their head of finance, practically vibrating with anxiety beside her. His nervous energy was infectious, and she fought the urge to snap at him. Victor wiped his palms on his trousers, the crisp wool doing little to absorb the sweat. He could practically taste the bitterness of failure. He'd staked his career on this deal, on Gavin's vision. To lose it now, to be so close, and yet the thought was unbearable. He shot a furtive glance at Gavin, whose jaw was clenched so tight Victor thought it might shatter. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the hushed murmur of the hotel staff. A janitor, dressed in an unremarkable uniform, pushed a cleaning cart past them, his movements quiet and efficient. He seemed oblivious to the tension radiating from the Hypernova executives, his focus entirely on the task at hand. Gavin, in his agitated state, found himself oddly fixated on the man. There was a quiet dignity in his movements, a sense of purpose that belied his menial role. He noticed the way the janitor's eyes, dark and intelligent, scanned the hallway, taking in every detail. He saw the slight pause, the almost imperceptible flicker of his gaze as he glanced at the sign outside the conference room, the sign announcing the impending meeting between Hypernova Systems and Jinhua Technologies. Leah cleared her throat, breaking the spell. I'm going to stall say we're waiting on our legal guy. Buy us some time. Every syllable was a carefully constructed facade, designed to project an image of calm control. Inside, she felt like a tightly wound spring about to snap. As she turned to enter the conference room, the janitor spoke, his voice soft yet clear, cutting through the tension like a knife. You're missing a word on that sign. The verb is off. It changes the meaning subtly, but significantly. In this context, Gavin stared at him, stunned. The janitor continued, his Mandarin precise and elegant, explaining the nuance of the missing character, the implications for the meeting's title. He spoke with an authority that belied his position, his understanding of both language and business protocol startlingly profound. Gavin felt a jolt, a sudden shift in his perception. The world seemed to tilt, the familiar hierarchy of CEO and janitor blurring. He felt a flush of shame at his own assumptions, the unconscious biases that had rendered this man invisible. Leah, equally surprised, turned back, her initial surprise quickly replaced by a calculating assessment. This man, this janitor, held the key to unlocking their current impasse. Her mind raced, evaluating the risks, the potential rewards. It was a gamble, but a gamble she was increasingly willing to take. Victor's jaw hung slack. He looked from the janitor to Gavin, his mind struggling to process the situation. The janitor speaking fluent Mandarin correcting the signage, it was like something out of a bizarre dream. He felt a flicker of hope ignite within him, a fragile flame in the face of impending disaster. The janitor, seemingly unfazed by the stunned silence he'd created, finished his explanation and returned to his cart, his expression unreadable. He resumed his work, polishing the brass fixtures with meticulous care, as if correcting multi-billion-dollar deal signage was just another part of his daily routine. Gavin, his mind reeling, felt a profound sense of humility wash over him. He had been so focused on his own anxieties, his own preconceived notions, that he had completely overlooked the potential, the hidden brilliance right in front of him. He thought about the countless times he'd passed individuals like Maurice, dismissing them as insignificant, failing to see beyond the surface. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had been so wrong. "Wait," Gavin said, his voice hoarse. He stepped towards the janitor, his mind racing. "Please, what's your name?" The janitor paused, his hand resting on the handle of his cart. He looked at Gavin, his gaze steady and penetrating. "Maurice Jenkins," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Mr. Jenkins," Gavin said, his tone laced with newfound respect. "I believe you may have just saved this deal, and perhaps something far more important than that." Leah, ever pragmatic, stepped forward. "Mr. Jenkins, we are about to begin a crucial meeting with Jinhua Technologies. Our interpreter has encountered an unforeseen circumstance. We find ourselves in a difficult position. Would you be willing to assist us?" She held her breath, the fate of the deal hanging in the balance. Maurice met her gaze, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, each second feeling like an eternity. The scent of jasmine from a nearby flower arrangement filled the air, a delicate counterpoint to the tension crackling between them. Finally, Maurice spoke, his voice soft yet resonant. "Let's see what we can do." Gavin felt a surge of hope, powerful and exhilarating. He watched as Maurice straightened, his posture shifting subtly, the janitor disappearing, replaced by someone more. He couldn't quite define it, but there was an aura of competence, of quiet power, that emanated from him. It was as if a hidden door had been opened, revealing a glimpse of a world beyond the surface, a world where assumptions crumbled and true potential was unveiled. The meeting, the deal, the future of Hypernova, it all felt different now, charged with a new and unexpected energy. The opulent conference room, bathed in the soft glow of Beijing's morning light, felt less like a space for negotiation and more like a gilded cage. Gavin Langston, CEO of Hypernova Systems, felt the weight of the past few hours pressing down on him like the stifling humidity that clung to the city. The unexpected absence of their interpreter, a crucial cog in this intricate machine of a multi-billion-dollar deal, had thrown a wrench into the carefully oiled gears of his plans. He'd envisioned a smooth, almost theatrical display of corporate synergy, a testament to his leadership and vision. Instead, he felt a prickle of unease beneath his tailored suit. He adjusted his tie, the silk a cool contrast to the heat rising in his chest. He could practically hear the whispers of his detractors back in Silicon Valley, their doubts fueled by every minute that ticked by without resolution. Leah Dorsey, Hypernova's chief strategy officer, radiated an aura of calm amidst the brewing storm. Her fingers, adorned with a single, understated silver ring, tapped a rhythmic beat against the polished mahogany table. Her gaze, sharp and assessing, swept across the room, lingering for a moment on Victor Crane, the head of finance, whose usual jovial demeanor had been replaced by a palpable anxiety. Gavin caught her eye, a flicker of something akin to understanding passing between them. "She's thinking what I'm thinking." He realized that this could all fall apart. The thought, stark and unwelcome, sent a shiver down his spine. Then, a quiet presence materialized at the periphery of their tension. Maurice Jenkins, the janitor they had encountered earlier, stood by the door, a mop leaning unobtrusively against the wall. He'd changed out his uniform and wore a simple, but impeccably clean, white shirt and dark trousers. "He asked if you all needed more time," Maurice said, his voice a low rumble, unexpectedly resonant in the vast room. "I told him you'd be just another minute." His Mandarin was flawless, each syllable crisp and precise, a stark contrast to the fractured attempts Gavin and his team had made earlier. The words hung in the air, momentarily suspending the tension like a bubble about to burst. Gavin stared at Maurice, a mixture of disbelief and burgeoning hope warring within him. Could this janitor be their salvation? He swallowed, the lump in his throat suddenly constricting his airway. "Don't be a fool, Langston," he chided himself internally. "This is absurd." Yet, a sliver of desperation, sharp and insistent, clung to the edges of his logic. Leah, ever pragmatic, was the first to recover. Her gaze, no longer assessing, but now almost calculating, fixed on Maurice. "Mr. Jenkins," she said, her voice steady and clear, "your Mandarin is exceptional. Have you studied it extensively?" A flicker of something unreadable crossed Morris's face, a fleeting shadow in the depths of his dark eyes. "I've picked up a few things over the years," he replied, his tone carefully neutral. He met Leah's gaze, an almost imperceptible challenge in his steady demeanor. Mr. Chungi, CEO of Jinhua Technologies, entered the room, his presence radiating an air of quiet authority. He moved with a measured grace, his every gesture imbued with a sense of cultural refinement that Gavin suddenly felt acutely lacking in himself. Mr. Chungi's eyes, sharp and intelligent, settled on Maurice. A faint smile touched his lips. "Your translator is very impressive, Mr. Langston." The words, spoken in perfect English, hit Gavin with the force of a physical blow. He felt a flush of shame creeping up his neck. "He sees it," Gavin thought. "He sees my prejudice, my arrogance." He felt a desperate need to salvage the situation, to prove that he wasn't the narrow-minded fool he suddenly felt like. "Mr. Jenkins has kindly offered his assistance," he managed, his voice sounding stiff and unnatural even to his own ears. What followed was a masterclass in negotiation, a delicate dance of words and gestures, of implied meanings and unspoken understandings. Maurice navigated the complexities of the deal with an effortless grace that left Gavin speechless. He didn't just translate. He interpreted, bridging the cultural gap with an intuitive understanding that went far beyond mere linguistics. He anticipated Mr. Chungi's questions, preempted potential misunderstandings, and steered the conversation with a subtle yet firm hand. Gavin watched, mesmerized as the deal unfolded, each point meticulously addressed, each concern carefully allayed. The tension that had been a suffocating presence in the room gradually dissipated, replaced by a growing sense of optimism. He felt a wave of admiration, tinged with a strange sense of humility, wash over him. He had judged Maurice based on superficial appearances, blinded by his own preconceived notions. He'd almost allowed his own biases to cost him everything. The final handshake, a symbolic sealing of the multi-billion-dollar agreement, felt more significant than any Gavin had ever experienced. It wasn't just a business deal. It was a lesson learned, a stark reminder that true talent could be found in the most unexpected places. He looked at Maurice, a genuine smile finally breaking through the mask of professional composure he usually wore. "Who are you?" he wondered, the question echoing not just in the room, but in the vast, shifting landscape of his own assumptions. The deal was more than just a victory for Hypernova Systems. It was a personal awakening for Gavin Langston. He realized he had stumbled upon something far more valuable than a successful negotiation. He had discovered the humbling power of open-mindedness. The whispers of his critics faded into the background, replaced by the quiet resonance of a newfound respect, not just for Maurice, but for the hidden depths that lay beneath the surface of every human interaction. The air in the room, once heavy with tension, now hummed with the quiet electricity of potential. The opulent suite, moments before a cacophony of celebration, hung suspended in a strange, disbelieving silence. The scent of jasmine tea, lingering from the meeting, mingled with the metallic tang of Gavin's own fear, now slowly receding like a tide pulling back from the shore. He could still feel the phantom pressure of Mr. Chungi's handshake, firm, respectful, finalizing a deal Gavin had moments ago believed was lost to the capricious winds of fate. He watched Leah, usually a picture of controlled efficiency, pace a small, agitated path across the plush carpet, her fingers drumming a restless rhythm against her thigh. Victor, still clutching his briefcase as if it contained the remnants of their shattered hopes, stared blankly at the closed door, his face a mask of bewildered relief. Gavin, his own heart still hammering a frantic tattoo against his ribs, felt the weight of the past few hours pressing down on him. A crushing burden suddenly lifted. "I thought we were dead," Victor finally breathed, the words echoing the hollow dread that had settled in Gavin's stomach when their interpreter had called, his voice laced with a panicked urgency that spoke of a family emergency and a hastily booked flight. Gavin had felt a cold fist clench around his gut. Years of work, millions of dollars invested, his own reputation hanging precariously in the balance, all threatened by a single, unavoidable absence. He had seen the flicker of doubt in Mr. Chungi's eyes, the polite but unmistakable shift in his demeanor. The deal, so close it felt like sand slipping through his fingers. He didn't just translate. Leah's voice, sharp and incisive, cut through the silence, her pacing mumki on ko. He negotiated. He shifted the mood. He understood. Her words trailed off, a hint of awe coloring her normally pragmatic tone. Gavin watched her, a strange disquiet stirring within him. He had been so focused on the precipice of failure, so consumed by his own anxiety, he hadn't fully grasped the magnitude of what Maurice had accomplished. He had walked into the room, a quiet, unassuming figure in a hotel uniform, and had effortlessly navigated the complex currents of international business, cultural nuances, and high-stakes negotiation. He had saved the deal, not just with his linguistic skills, but with an innate understanding of human dynamics Gavin himself, with years of experience, often struggled to master. "Where the hell did you learn to do that?" Gavin had asked Maurice after Mr. Chungi's delegation had departed, the words escaping before he could fully process the bewilderment that swirled within him. He had expected a simple answer, a modest recounting of language classes, or perhaps a family connection to China. What he received instead was a story that unfolded like a carefully preserved scroll, revealing a life of unexpected depth and tragically unrealized potential. Maurice, his demeanor still calm, his eyes holding a quiet sadness, had explained his past, a past that included a doctorate in linguistics, specializing in Mandarin dialects, and a promising career in international conflict resolution, abruptly derailed by a family tragedy, a descent into grief, and a system that had failed to see beyond his current circumstance. He had spoken of his passion for language, his fascination with the bridges it could build between cultures, and the quiet satisfaction he found in helping others communicate, even in the small, everyday interactions of his current role. Gavin listened, his initial astonishment hardening into a cold, uncomfortable awareness of his own prejudice, of the assumptions he had made based on a uniform, on a societal label. He had seen Maurice as a janitor, a nameless face in the background of his meticulously planned world. He had failed to see the man, the intellect, the potential that had been quietly waiting to be recognized. The silence in the suite now was different. The relief remained, but it was tinged with a profound sense of unease. Victor sank into an armchair, the briefcase finally resting on the floor beside him. His gaze was distant, his usual boisterous energy replaced by a quiet contemplation. Leah, her pacing finally ceasing, stood by the window, her back to the room, her shoulders slumped as if bearing a sudden weight. The city lights glittered outside, a vibrant tapestry of human ambition and striving, a backdrop to the silent drama unfolding within the room. Gavin felt a strange, unfamiliar humility settle over him. He had been so focused on the summit, on the victory, he had failed to see the mountain range that lay beneath. He had been so intent on securing the deal, he had overlooked the human element, the very thing Maurice, in his quiet, unassuming way, had understood so instinctively. The deal was important, yes, but it was the realization of Morris's hidden potential, the stark injustice of his situation, that resonated within Gavin, a discordant note in the symphony of his success. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this encounter, this unexpected turn of events, would change not just the trajectory of Hypernova Systems, but his own understanding of the world, of the hidden talents that bloomed in the shadows, unseen, unheard, until a chance encounter, a moment of crisis, brought them into the light. The stale scent of instant noodles and overbrewed coffee clung to the air in the staff lounge, a stark contrast to the opulent ballroom where champagne flutes still shimmered under the fading afternoon light. Gavin felt the weight of every opulent chandelier, every silk drape, pressing down on him as he hesitated at the threshold. This small, utilitarian space, with its mismatched plastic chairs and chipped formica table, felt like another world. A world he rarely glimpsed, a world inhabited by the unseen hands that kept the gears of his own world turning. He spotted Maurice by the window, his back to the door, gazing out at the sprawling Beijing cityscape. The man's stillness, the way his shoulders seemed to carry the weight of the skyline, resonated with a quiet strength Gavin hadn't noticed before. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing awkwardly in the small room. Maurice turned, his expression unreadable. For a fleeting moment, Gavin felt a pang of self-consciousness, an unexpected vulnerability. He, Gavin Langston, CEO of Hypernova, felt small. "Mr. Jenkins," Gavin began, the words feeling stiff and inadequate. He pushed past the awkwardness, forcing a warmer tone. "Maurice, I wanted to thank you." The words seemed to hang in the air, insufficient, hollow. He thought of the near disaster averted, the millions, no, billions, riding on this deal, the pressure he'd been under from the board, the whispers of his potential downfall. And this man, this janitor, had saved it all. The thought left him feeling strangely unbalanced. Maurice nodded, a slight incline of his head. "You're welcome, Mr. Langston." His voice was calm, even, betraying no hint of the pivotal role he'd just played. Gavin felt a prickle of unease. This wasn't the awestruck gratitude he'd half expected, the effusive thanks that usually followed his grand gestures. This was respectful detachment. "It's Gavin," he corrected, wincing internally at how forced it sounded. "And I owe you more than just a thank you. We wouldn't have figured it out. Not without you." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tic he'd thought he'd conquered years ago. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant hum of the city. Maurice finally spoke, his gaze still fixed on the window, on the concrete and glass jungle that sprawled before them. "You never went back?" The question, seemingly out of nowhere, caught Gavin off guard. He frowned, trying to parse the meaning. "Back where?" Maurice turned then, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "To your studies. Linguistics. Conflict resolution. Your undergraduate thesis fascinating work on cross-cultural communication in high-stakes negotiations." Gavin stared at him, speechless. How could this man, a janitor in a Beijing hotel, know about his abandoned PhD program? A ghost of a past he rarely acknowledged, even to himself. A wave of self-consciousness washed over him. He'd envisioned himself a scholar, a bridge builder between cultures. But the allure of the corporate world, the promise of power and influence, had proved too strong. He'd traded his passion for pragmatism, a choice he'd tried to bury under layers of ambition and success. He swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. "Plan to," he admitted, the words barely a whisper. But life didn't slow down. The excuse sounded weak even to his own ears, a hollow echo of the justifications he'd told himself for years. Maurice nodded, a slow, understanding gesture. Life rarely does. He looked back towards the window, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. "My dissertation was on the social-linguistic implications of silence in Mandarin business negotiations. Ironically, I ended up finding more silence in the daily grind than I ever did in the boardroom." Gavin felt a strange kinship with this man, a shared understanding that transcended their vastly different circumstances. He saw a reflection of his own buried dreams in Morris's quiet resignation, a shared understanding of the compromises life demands. The weight of his assumptions, the prejudices that had blinded him to Morris's potential, pressed down on him with renewed force. He'd seen a uniform, a label, and had dismissed the man beneath. He hadn't even considered that this quiet, unassuming janitor could possess such a sharp intellect, such a deep understanding of the very nuances that had almost cost him the deal. The realization was humbling, a stark reminder of the limitations of his own perception. He thought of Leah's quick thinking, her ability to see past the surface, to recognize Morris's value where he had failed. He thought of Victor's surprised admiration, his open acknowledgement of Morris's skill. He realized that he was the only one who hadn't seen it, the only one blinded by his own preconceived notions. Gavin started, then hesitated, searching for the right words. I misjudged you. Badly. He met Morris's gaze, holding his eyes. I apologize for that, and I want to thank you properly this time, not just for saving the deal, but for showing me something about myself. A faint smile touched Morris's lips. Mr. Langston, he said, his voice soft but firm, sometimes the greatest insights come from the most unexpected places. And sometimes, he added, a glint of humor in his eyes, a janitor can teach a CO a thing or two about closing a deal. The air in the small staff lounge, heavy with the scent of instant noodles and regret, suddenly felt lighter. Gavin left the room, the weight of the chandeliers, the silk drapes, no longer a burden. They felt like a challenge, a reminder of the world he inhabited, a world he now saw with clearer eyes. He had a deal to celebrate, a team to thank, and a perspective to reassess. And perhaps, just perhaps, a new understanding of where true talent could be found. The polished mahogany table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, reflecting the faces of the Hypernova board members like portraits in a dimly lit gallery. Gavin Langston, CEO, stood at the head of the table, a knot tightening in his stomach that had nothing to do with the lukewarm coffee in front of him. He adjusted his tie, the silk a cool contrast against his suddenly clammy skin. He'd rehearsed this presentation countless times, yet the words felt alien, heavy on his tongue. He'd spent years crafting an image of unflappable confidence, an image that now felt brittle, threatening to crack under the weight of the story he was about to tell. Leah Dorsey, her usual crisp composure tinged with an unfamiliar anticipation, sat to his right, a silent bastion of support. Across from her, Victor Crane fiddled with his pen, his gaze flitting nervously around the room. Gavin knew they were both reliving that surreal night in Beijing, the night their meticulously planned triumph had nearly crumbled into dust. The night a janitor, a man they'd overlooked and underestimated, had become their unlikely savior. The Beijing deal, Gavin began, his voice steadier than he expected, was touted as a landmark achievement for Hypernova, a testament to our innovative technology, our strategic brilliance. He paused, the silence amplifying the unspoken question hanging in the air. He could almost feel the collective scrutiny of the board, each furrowed brow a silent indictment of his near failure. He swallowed, the dryness in his throat mirroring the arid landscape of his own hubris just weeks ago. But the truth, he continued, his voice gaining strength, is far more complex, far more humbling. He clicked the remote, the screen behind him flickering to life. A picture of Maurice Jenkins, captured from the hotel security footage, filled the space. A simple man in a simple uniform, his face etched with quiet dignity. An image so ordinary, yet so profoundly extraordinary in its context. A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. Confusion, disbelief, a touch of indignation. Gavin recognized them all. He'd felt the same way just weeks ago. This man, Gavin declared, his voice ringing with conviction. This man, Maurice Jenkins, was responsible for closing the deal with Jinhua. Not me, not Leah, him. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. He saw the shock ripple through the assembled faces, a wave crashing against the shore of their preconceived notions. He'd anticipated resistance, skepticism, perhaps even outright dismissal. But there was also something else flickering in their eyes, a dawning awareness that resonated with his own recent epiphany. He recounted the events of that night, the frantic scramble for a replacement interpreter, the escalating tension, the palpable fear of failure. He described Morris's quiet competence, his nuanced understanding of Mandarin, his almost uncanny ability to navigate the complex cultural landscape of the negotiations. He didn't embellish, didn't try to paint a heroic picture. The truth, stark and simple, was powerful enough. We were so focused on our own carefully constructed plans, so blinded by our assumptions, Gavin admitted, his voice raw with self-reproach, that we failed to see the extraordinary talent right in front of us. We judged a book by its cover, and in doing so, nearly lost everything. He could see the wheels turning in their minds, the uncomfortable realization dawning that they, too, were complicit in this oversight. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions, with the weight of their collective introspection. Leah cleared her throat, her voice calm and measured, cutting through the tension. Maurice possesses a rare combination of linguistic skills and an innate understanding of conflict resolution. His background, as we later discovered, includes a degree in linguistics and years of experience working in international mediation. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. He chose to work as a janitor, for reasons we may never fully understand. But that doesn't diminish the value he brings to the table. Victor, usually the pragmatic voice of numbers and figures, spoke next, his voice tinged with an almost reverent awe. His insights into the Chinese market, his ability to bridge the cultural gap, it was remarkable. He saw opportunities we missed, navigated nuances we were completely oblivious to. He shook his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. It was a masterclass in negotiation, disguised as janitorial service. The initial shock had given way to a thoughtful silence, a collective introspection that settled over the room. Gavin took a deep breath, steeling himself for the next part of his presentation, the part that truly mattered. This incident, he declared, his voice resonating with newfound purpose, has forced us to confront a fundamental flaw in our approach to talent acquisition. We're so focused on traditional metrics, on pedigree and titles, that we're overlooking a vast pool of untapped potential. He clicked the remote again, a new slide appearing on the screen, the outline of a new company initiative, Project Nova. Project Nova will focus on identifying and nurturing talent within our own ranks, regardless of position or background. We'll implement skill-based assessments, mentorship programs, and create opportunities for internal mobility. He met the gaze of each board member, his voice firm with conviction. We will break down the artificial barriers we've created and foster a culture where talent can truly shine, wherever it may be found. The tension in the room had dissipated, replaced by a palpable sense of anticipation, of shared purpose. The board members, initially skeptical, now engaged in a lively discussion, their voices buzzing with ideas and suggestions. The incident with Maurice, initially a source of embarrassment, had become a catalyst for change, a turning point that had the potential to reshape the very fabric of Hypernova Systems. Gavin watched them, a quiet satisfaction settling in his chest. The journey had been humbling, painful even, but the destination was worth every ounce of discomfort. He knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew, with unwavering certainty, that they were finally heading in the right direction. The image of Maurice, a quiet figure in a simple uniform, remained etched in his mind, a constant reminder of the extraordinary potential that lies hidden in the most unexpected places. A reminder that true vision lies not in seeing what everyone else sees, but in seeing the potential that everyone else misses. The opulent conference room, once a stage for Gavin's near debacle, now shimmered under the refracted light of Beijing's burgeoning skyline. Months had passed since the Jinhua deal, months that had reshaped Hypernova Systems in ways Gavin could never have predicted. He traced the rim of his teacup, the porcelain cool against his fingertips, a stark contrast to the simmering unease he still felt when he remembered the precipice on which they'd stood. He could still hear the echo of Morris's calm, measured Mandarin, bridging the chasm between two cultures, two corporate behemoths, two worlds that had seemed impossibly far apart. The memory was a constant reminder, a prickle of shame mingled with profound gratitude. "Mr. Langston," Leah Dorsey's voice cut through his reverie. "They're ready for us." Her tone, as ever, was crisp and efficient, a counterpoint to the turmoil that still churned within him. Gavin nodded, straightening his tie. He glanced at Victor Crane, who offered a tight smile, the ghost of their shared panic still lingering in his eyes. They walked into the adjacent room, where representatives from Jinhua and other tech giants waited. The air crackled with anticipation. But this time, the tension was not born of fear, but of excitement. This wasn't a deal-closing meeting. This was a launch. The Level Ground initiative conceived by the unlikeliest of visionaries, their former janitor, Maurice Jenkins, was about to take its first breath. Gavin stepped up to the podium, the faces in the crowd a blur of expectation. He cleared his throat, the microphone amplifying the small sound, broadcasting it into the hushed room. He could feel the weight of responsibility, the pressure to articulate the profound shift in Hypernova's corporate philosophy, a shift inspired by a man who swept floors and spoke fluent Mandarin. "We're here today," Gavin began, his voice steadier than he expected, "because we realize something fundamental. Brilliance doesn't always wear a suit." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. He saw a flicker of recognition in Mr. Chungi's eyes, a subtle nod of agreement. "We almost lost a multi-billion-dollar deal because we were blinded by our own assumptions. We assumed that talent resided solely in boardrooms, in corner offices, in neatly pressed attire." He could feel the shift in the room, a palpable wave of intrigue. "We were wrong." The screen behind him lit up, displaying the logo of the Level Ground Initiative. A simple, yet powerful design. Two hands, different in color and size, clasped together on equal footing. The image resonated with the quiet hum of change that had been building within Hypernova for the past few months. Gavin outlined the program, detailing the comprehensive training and mentorship opportunities designed to unearth and nurture talent from unconventional sources. He described the partnerships they were forging with community colleges, vocational schools, even shelters, places where potential lay dormant, waiting for a spark. He spoke of the rigorous aptitude tests, designed by Maurice himself, which focused on skills and critical thinking rather than formal qualifications. He explained how they were dismantling the rigid hierarchical structure that had choked innovation and fostered a culture of exclusion. He felt a surge of pride, not for himself, but for the transformation he was witnessing. The fear of failure, the gnawing self-doubt that had haunted him for months, began to dissipate, replaced by a nascent sense of purpose. He wasn't just running a company, he was building a movement. Later, as the attendees mingled during the networking session, Gavin found himself drawn to the stage where Maurice was scheduled to speak. The room buzzed with conversations about Level Ground, its potential, its challenges. The skepticism Gavin had initially anticipated was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was a palpable sense of hope, a shared belief in the power of untapped potential. Maurice walked onto the stage, his presence commanding despite his unassuming attire. The janitor's uniform was gone, replaced by a simple, well-tailored suit. He held the microphone with a quiet confidence that radiated through the room. "My story isn't unique," Maurice began, his voice resonating with a deep timbre that held the room captive. "It's a story repeated countless times, in every corner of the world." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the audience, connecting with each individual. "It's the story of potential overlooked, of talent dismissed, of dreams deferred." He spoke of his own journey, of the circumstances that led him to Hypernova's hallways, of the quiet years he spent observing, learning, honing his skills in the shadows. "I'm not here because I was lucky," he declared, his voice rising with a quiet intensity. "I'm here because I stayed sharp, even when nobody was watching." He leaned forward, his eyes blazing with conviction. "So my question to you is, who are you not looking at?" The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the quiet intake of breath. Gavin felt a lump form in his throat. He understood. He understood the weight of those words, the challenge they posed, the responsibility they placed upon each person in that room. He watched as Maurice continued, his words painting a vivid picture of a future where talent was recognized regardless of background, where opportunity was not a privilege but a right, where the janitor could become the CEO and the CEO could learn from the janitor. He spoke of building bridges, not walls, of fostering inclusivity, not exclusivity. He spoke of the power of human potential, a power that lay dormant, waiting to be awakened. As the applause thundered through the room, Gavin knew that something fundamental had changed. He had changed. Hypernova had changed. The world, perhaps, was changing. And it had all started with a missed flight, a desperate CEO, and a janitor who spoke Mandarin. The realization settled deep within him, a quiet understanding that the true measure of success wasn't the size of the deal, but the size of the impact. And sometimes, the greatest impact comes from the most unexpected places.